Jarret chapter 13, part 2. Let us continue with our look at the vocabulary terms from the chapter. Last we left off with our last video. We were on this page, and let us begin with Sputnik. Sputnik, a Soviet-launched satellite into space, and this is the key part, Soviet-launched. It is the first man-made object in space. And so what we're looking at is the Russians were able to launch a man-made object into space before us, creating what became known as the space race. The space race was started out of the fear that the Soviets would use rockets to send atomic weapons to the United States, that the Soviets, because of their ability to put an object in space, and then a short time after Sputnik, they put the first man in space, a man by the name of Yuri Gagarin. Anyway, the United States, were afraid that the Soviets would use their superior rockets to send atomic weapons on those rockets. They would use those atomic weapons and those rockets to attack the United States. So what did we do? Well, we started our own space program, and we began to push the science and math in school, trying to create a short-term and a long-term solution to our problem. And the problem was that the Soviets were ahead of us in rocket technology. All right, our next one, loyalty review boards. This was created by President Truman. Keep in mind, President Truman first became president. Hold on.
Mrs. Tompkins, please call the first.
Yay, I'm back. And so President Truman became president when FDR died in '45, and he served through the end of the war. He served through the end of Roosevelt's term, which ended in '48, and he won his own term in '48. And of course, he was a president during the beginning of the Cold War. He was a president who lost China. China became a communist country while Truman was in office, and people use the term that he lost China. So what we're looking at is a growth of the Cold War while Truman was in office. Now again, it's not his fault, but he was the man who was in office at the time, so he deserves and gets some of the blame. And so not only do we see the Cold War escalating, but we see a number of countries turning communist like China. China was the second largest country in terms of size and the largest country in terms of population. Losing that to a communist country, to a communist government, is a little bit more than the American public could handle. And so the loyalty review boards were designed to investigate individual un-American activities. Now, what could some of these activities be? Well, one of them could be participation in the American Communist Party.
Mrs. Haskins.
So one of the things that could get you in trouble with the loyalty review boards is that you are participating in communist activities such as the Communist Party, the American Communist Party. There are any number of other things as well. If it was thought that you were sympathetic to communism or that you were an outright communist, these things could get you into trouble and theoretically could get you fired from your job, potentially even arrested, because at one time in the 40s and 50s, it was against the law to be a communist. So, again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I understand the fear, and if you want, you can sort of compare it to the fear that many Americans today have toward Islam. We have just fought several wars over the course of the last decade plus against Islamic jihadism in Afghanistan and Iraq. We have seen the rise of ISIS. Again, you can compare the two, the rise of communism in the Soviet Union back in the early 1920s. You have the rise of communism in communist China in the late 40s. The fear that is accompanied by that. We had the first Red Scare in the 1920s. In the Cold War in 1945 up to about 1990, we also have what is known as the Second Red Scare, particularly during the 50s. This Second Red Scare brought about all kinds of changes in the government, the way the government did things, the way the government looked groups that were a little bit different, a little bit of a different political view. And so today, that fear has been taken, from the communists and aimed at Muslims. We look at some of the things that are going on in Europe and some of the violence and some of the terror that comes with it, and people see sort of the same thing happening here. And so again, I'm not saying that Muslims are bad people. I'm not saying that communists are bad people. Again, but there were those in the country, the period of time we're looking at, and again, we're looking at the late 40s through the 50s at the moment, who feared communism because of what it represented. The stated goal of Russia, the stated goal of Russian communism was world domination. The stated goal of ISIS and of the Islamic Jihad taking place all over the world is world domination. And so we are kind of going through ourselves something similar to the second Red Scare. But instead of being communism, it is Islamic jihadism that is the enemy. Now, as a result of this growing fear, because of the second Red Scare, because of things like the loyalty review boards, we have other activities, we have other groups investigating either subversive, communist, or communist sympathizers within our nation. The next one to look at, the last one on this page, is the House Un-American Activities Committee, known as HUAC. HUAC is the acronym HUAAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. This committee questioned actors, directors, writers, and others within the Hollywood community, within the entertainment community about their possible communist sympathies. Now again, let's take a look at this. Possible, maybe possible. There is not necessarily a direct tie, but there's a possible tie. So actors, directors, writers, others could be lighting technicians, makeup artists, stuntmen, those types of people. So HUAC looked at Hollywood and the associated fields to Hollywood, movie making, television making, those types of entertainments, looked at them and questioned many of these people about potential, possible communist sympathies or whether or not you were actually a communist. Let's move forward. So, because of the possible communist ties, because of the fear being generated by the second Red Scare, because of the fear of Russia, which, by the way, in the early 50s already detonated a couple atomic weapons, which they stole from us thanks to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, by the way. We'll get to them in a few moments. Because of all of this, many Americans were looking at each other a little bit differently. Those who had been previously thought to be a little weird, a little odd, a little anti-government, were now being viewed slightly differently. Why? Well, thanks to HUAC, thanks to other government avenues, government investigations, people are now looking at each other going, oh my gosh, are you one of them? Them, of course, being anyone who's not us, in this case, them being communists. And so a number of people in Hollywood, for example, again, we're talking about HUAC and their investigation into Hollywood and the entertainment industry, many of them were blacklisted. To be blacklisted is to lose your job and not be able to get another one within that field. So you lose your job and you're not able to get another one again within that field. And there were a number of people who were blacklisted, by the way, not by HUAC. HUAC is a government committee. It's a House of Representatives committee. They investigated and they uncovered what they believed was evidence that a number of people within Hollywood were either directly communist, outright communist, or somewhat sympathetic to communism. It was Hollywood themselves. It was Hollywood who then blacklisted those people, not the government. We need to make sure we understand that Hollywood blacklisted their own. Now, were they pressured by the government? Yeah. But the government did not blacklist them. So those who HUAC decided were members or former members of communist groups or sympathetic to communist groups would then be blacklisted. By whom? By Hollywood. Some individuals like Jarret were prosecuted for perjury. They lied under oath. They go before a judge. They stand up in court to put their right hand, they put their left hand on the Bible, raise their right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me, so help you God. Yes, I do. And then you lie. That is perjury. Perjury carries a jail sentence. Now, again, depending on different circumstances, what the penalty could be, it can vary. But Jarret, who was widely and is still widely believed to have been a spy for Russia, was not found guilty of being a communist, but he was found guilty of perjury while under oath. Now, let's go back to Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. This is a husband and wife team who were arrested, charged, convicted, executed for treason. Husband and wife who were arrested for espionage. They were charged with espionage. They were convicted by a jury of their peers for espionage against the United States, and they were executed for treason. Treason is one of the few crimes that we, the United States, use the death penalty. Murder being the other. So, what did the Rosenbergs do? Well, they sold atomic bomb secrets to the Soviets. Now, to be on the fair side, to be on the safe side, to make sure you get both sides, many people doubted that they were guilty. And again, the notes mentioned like Sacco and Vanzetti. We talked about Sacco and Vanzetti in the 1920s, two radicals from Italy who were charged with murder during a holdup gone bad. Many people believe that Sacco and Vanzetti were just the pawns because of the fear against immigrants because of the first Red Scare. All right, I'm back. So many people, to this day, many people, now again, what number, I don't know. I am not one of those many people, but many people doubted the guilt of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, that they were framed. Now again, I am not a big scholar of this. I haven't studied it greatly, but what little I've looked into it, it looks to me like they were guilty. In particular, especially Julius. Ethel, his wife, was a little bit less cut and dried. Again, based on what little digging I've done into this, it looked like he was guilty beyond a shadow of doubt, and she was a little bit less guilty. But, husband and wife, boom, chakalaka, they're both dead. Okay, now this takes us to the Vienna Papers in 1977. The National Security Agency, the A on agency should be capitalized, sorry about that, released documents that were uncovered decades before, but they released documents of decoded Russian messages that linked numerous Americans, including Julius Rosenberg, to Russian spying. So here we have the Vienna Papers, released documents in 1977, decoded Russian messages that we intercepted that linked many Americans, including Julius Rosenberg, whom we had executed several decades before, linked them to Russian spy. Now, again, was this a plot by the Russians to sow discontent amongst the American public? Were these documents authentic? Was Julius Rosenberg actually a spy? Or were these documents faked to create chaos, confusion within the American atomic energy field? Was it a way to destabilize American military? Was it a way just to create havoc in America? I don't know. It's entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that these two puppies right here were as guilty as sin. They sold nuclear secrets to our enemy, which could have potentially led to World War III or a relatively short-lived but still a nuclear war. Let's move forward. Again, we are discussing some things that were done by our government, both in the House and the Senate and the federal government, to look into spying, to look into the threat of communism here in the United States. And we have 3 of them on this page: Joseph McCarthy, the Second Red Scare, and McCarthyism. Now, I'm going to touch on the Second Red Scare first. I've already mentioned it previously, but I want to make sure that we fully understand it, and you should already, but again, we'll touch on this one because the first one and the third one kind of go together. After World War II, and again, World War II ends in 1945, there was a...
Mr. Felix Ochoa, please call it.
You know, that's annoying. Don't they know I'm working here? Anyway, after the end of World War II, there was a renewing of the fear of communist spies in America. Okay, pretty simple. We know that there were spies in America. We know because we caught some of them red-handed. And for everyone we caught, the greater the fear was. Now again, what was this fear? Well, part of the fear was that the communists were attempting to undermine the American way of life. Now again, as I told you previously, one of the stated goals of Russian communism was world domination, either through physical force, through conquering an enemy with its military, which of course Russia could not do with America, or subverting that country, for example, America. Since Russia could not defeat us militarily, they wanted to subvert us. And they wanted to subvert us through the weakening of our government, the weakening of the ties between the American public and the government, the perverting, the subverting of college students. There has been any number of recorded cases since the end of World War II, through the Korean War, definitely during the Vietnam War, and even up through some of the protests against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, that these protests were funded and started by communist groups. So if the Russians cannot beat us in battle, they were going to do the best they could to undermine the American way of life, and one way to do that is through the brainwashing, the confusing of college students. Now again, I understand you're a year or two away from college, and those college students that I'm referring to, I'm about to mention in more depth, are, again, not a lot smarter than you. I mean, again, they got a couple years on you, but again, you are essentially they. And I don't really mean to make this overly mean and rude, but again, you know, teenagers, early college students, young 20-year-olds are some of the most gullible people in the world. You have a little bit of knowledge. There's an old expression about a little knowledge being a dangerous thing. And teenagers are easily swayed by their emotions. Teenagers are have all these different things going on around them, all these emotions they're feeling, and they don't know how to process that. It comes with experience. It comes with knowledge. And teenagers have a little bit of knowledge. You know, again, teenagers talking, you know, 18, 19 to the 20, 22, 24-year-olds. Again, that college age group have a little bit of knowledge, but not enough to fully process what is right or wrong in many cases. One quick comment on this. Right this very moment, the Democrat Party is running Bernie Sanders. Well, the Democrat Party is not running Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders is running for the Democrat nomination for president. Bernie Sanders is an admitted socialist. We fought wars to keep people like Bernie Sanders and their political philosophy out of America. What did McCarthy, and we'll get to McCarthy in a moment, what did HUAC do? They were looking for communists. Communism and socialism go hand in hand. Communism is a political system. Socialism is an economic system. They go hand in hand. And so we are looking at, many people believe today, a President Barack Obama, who is at the very least socialistic in his economic views. We have Hillary Clinton, who agrees with Barack Obama pretty much everything he's done, so therefore you have to conclude that she has some socialistic tendencies. And we have Bernie Sanders, who is an admitted socialist. 50 years ago, he would have been potentially put in jail. Now he's that close to being the Democrat nominee and potentially president of the United States. And guess who are his biggest supporters? College-age students. Okay. Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy was the junior senator from, I believe it was Michigan. Junior senator means that he's the younger of the pair. He shocked America by claiming on national TV to have hundreds of names of Soviet spies that were here in the United States spying against America. Now, okay, Joseph McCarthy, I'm sorry, not Michigan, Wisconsin. I'm sorry. Not that anyone knows the difference between the two, really. One of those northern states no one cares about. Anyway, he claimed to have a list of hundreds of names. I think actually the number is supposed to be 205. Soviet spies. Though he produced little proof of his accusations, he captured, no matter how briefly, the attention of America. He led Senate hearings. Again, he was a U.S. Senator. He led Senate hearings looking into communist infiltration of the military, among other groups. Eventually, it was proven that his witch hunt for communists was false. Now, again, this is a tough topic. Were there communist spies in America? Yes. We know it's true. We had convicted and executed not too long before this Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Alger Hiss was a spy, and there are others. We know this for a fact. Unfortunately, McCarthy produced little evidence, but made a lot of noise. And so people began to focus on the messenger and not the message. What was the message? There are Soviet spies in America. Who was the messenger? Joseph McCarthy. Was McCarthy a good guy? No, he wasn't. He was a drunk. He was a bully. He was belligerent. He was rude. He was obnoxious. But the message of Soviet spies got lost in the trampling of Joseph McCarthy. McCarthy wanted fame. He wanted to be recognized. He wanted the notoriety that comes from being a powerful senator. So what appeared to be a witch hunt is a hunt for someone or something that doesn't exist. Okay? Because there were no such things as witches. So a witch hunt is a crusade to find something that doesn't exist. So, but even by that definition, witch hunts is not what is happening, because we have proven, it was proven that there were numerous American spies. They did exist in America at the time. So again, it wasn't a witch hunt. We know that there were numerous American spies in America. We executed two just a few years before McCarthy rose to power, though brief power. We know Alger Hiss. We know there were a number of other Russian spies. Spies who were stealing, spies who were selling nuclear secrets, among others, to the Russians. Was McCarthy a good guy? No. He was a bad guy. He was a bad guy. And in his bad guyness, the message of Soviet spies in America got lost because too many people were focusing in on McCarthy. They focused on him and not the spies. A new word was even created, McCarthyism, which means making harsh accusations without any evidence. Let's take this a step further. This will be the last thing we cover. We're already about 24 minutes. In about a minute or so, we'll be done with this. Joseph McCarthy was a Republican. And so over the years, that term has been used specifically toward Republicans as they make accusations. Now, was McCarthy wrong? Yes, he was. He was wrong the way he did things. He didn't have hundreds of names of Russian spies. Was he correct that there were Russian spies? Yes, there were. They existed. We know that, okay? but the way he went about it, that led to this term McCarthyism. In today's media world, only Republicans can be McCarthy-like, not Democrats. And so this says a great deal about it. In the 50s, the media was on the side of, yeah, let's find these spies. Today, it is, let's protect those people in politics whom we like. Okay, I've gone further with this than I wanted to. I spent more time on this than I wanted to. So this is finished. Part 2. We be done. Bye.